Hmm. Hey, everybody. My name is Hayden Sanders. I am a senior political science major. Y'all all know, well, y'all have gotten to know me a lot this semester. And due to my major, I am doing my final presentation over John Mearsheimer on Israel and Hamas. So this is not if you go look at the YouTube video, you'll see that this was not just over Israel and Hamas. It was more of a focus on the grand strategy of the United States. And so just a little bit of background on the panel that happened. So this panel took place on October 30th, 2013. So, around about 3 weeks after the first attacks launched by Hamas into Israel. And I'm going to go back to that word of grand strategy. So, what grand strategy is a state's strategic use of both military and non military items and how they can be used to advance and achieve the national interest in a long term. So, here we have a little bit of background on John Mearsheimer. So, as you can see from this picture in the bottom right, if you have read Machiavelli's The Prince, you would have seen this picture. He has coined this picture Machiavelli, which is very funny, but also it kind of shows that he took a lot of inspiration from Machiavelli's works, as Machiavelli's kind of viewed as like a classical realist. And as we get to the bottom of this, you'll kind of see uh, how Mearsheimer focuses on realism. So he started with a bachelor's degree from Army West Point. He then got a graduate's master degree from USC, and he got a doctorate from Cornell. All of these are in political science or political theory. I believe his bachelor's was in political science, then his master's and PhD were both in political theory. He wrote two major books, which I view kind of have a big effect on this ongoing class, and which could be, or on our class in this ongoing conflict, which we can kind of view. The first was the Israel lobby, which we kind of went over in class, as well as the tragedy of great power politics. So for the Israel lobby, it's kind of a criticism on what the authors, which was Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, I believe, uh, view as the United States aligning itself too closely with Israel. And this can be at the expense of pursuing a more balanced approach to this conflict, which has persisted throughout their lifetimes of Israel and Palestine. And they also view that they said in the book that it was because of a large group of people involved heavily in the government, which lobby for kind of a pro-Zionist approach to U.S. politics. And what the tragedy of great power politics was that he outlined his realist perspective on international relations, and he argued that states act in their own self-interest, leading to a constant struggle for power and security. Now, I believe that is a big kind of tell on how he views Israel coming forward and how he kind of views the world as kind of like a constant preservation. So he was kind of one of the forerunners of the neo-realist movement of political theory. This is with Christoph Waltz, not to be confused with Stephen Walt, who is also another member who was kind of prominent in this. And so what neo-realism is, it is an evolution of the classical realism, and it kind of seeks to provide a more systematic and structural understanding of international politics. Just to go through and highlight a couple things about neo-realism that kind of pertain to how the world is viewed nowadays through the eyes of Mearsheimer. It kind of assumes that the international system is anarchic, meaning that there is no overarching world government to enforce rules and order. So he doesn't view like NATO or the UN as this, and no new world order. He also Neorealism also places a strong emphasis on the distribution of power among states as a key determinant of their power. This is big going into Israel, because Israel believes it is in a system in which the power balance is stacked against them, and it's them versus the Arab states. And then finally, we also have that neorealism suggests that states engage in a constant pursuit of maintaining or shifting the balance of power in their favor. So this idea of neorealism kind of evolved late in the 20th century with the fall of the Cold War, in which the world went from a bipolar, meaning two great powers, to a unipolar system. And if you actually go through and watch the video on this thing, he called this the unipolar moment, and he believes this unipolar moment kind of led to where we are today. So next we have Mearsheimer on Israel itself and why the focus should not be there. So he says that the Middle East crisis will have severe repercussions for Israel, its neighbors, and for U.S. foreign policy. From a perspective of grand strategy, the U.S. diverting its attention towards the ongoing issue and conflict in the Middle East is a major mistake in Mearsheimer's eyes. He states that you are willing to put blood and iron, meaning anything that you could put into the area, you would into these three. And those are Europe, East Asia, and the Middle East. And within the Middle East, in particular, the Israel-Palestine disputed territory. Now, this is not for the reason you would think it is, because he views these areas as kind of an into the area due to it lying along the Mediterranean and being kind of two states which we should have helped in the long run. But he also states that you care about Europe and East Asia because the rising powers are there. You care about the Middle East because of oil, mainly because you want it to be a balance of power in the area in which there's no single oil hegemony. He states that there is no country capable of this hegemony in the area, and that is why we should turn our focus to what should be the United States' main focus, and that is China. He also states that the problem in Israel will never go away. It will only get worse, and the darkness lay ahead in the region. So if we're just going to go on to the conflict himself and what Mearsheimer says, he states that the conflict threatens for the entire region to become involved in an all-out war, which we've discussed many times in class with Hezbollah, Iran, and as we'll get into in the next slide, there are more countries involved than we think are more radical groups that are involved. He states that to his dismay, we as a country are not going to go anywhere when it comes to Israel. He says that the United States has been deeply invested in a two-state system, and we have failed. There's no two-state solution. And he puts most of that blame on, he states, the presidents he has witnessed throughout his life, and that consists of Jimmy Carter to present day. He also states, if you consider Greater Israel, which includes, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the whole Green Line area, that if you consider that a Jewish state, there are an equal number of Palestinians as Israeli Jews in that area, 7.3 million each. He says that Gaza is the largest open air prison in the world due to Israel kind of forcing those people into there and not allowing them to leave. He said that Israelis do not want to give equal rights to Palestinians because then they run the risk of losing a majority Jewish state. He says that Israel is an apartheid state because of this, and he said that the ultra-Orthodox Jews in the area, which are at a growing number, keep this hatred towards Palestinians flowing. Okay, so if we just want to continue on with what he was saying in there, he says that the only hope for settling this conflict was a two-state solution, much like he said on the last slide. However, he said that train has left the station with this ongoing conflict. He said the U.S. is now completely joined at the hip with Israel, more than they ever were. He said that this conflict has greatly affected the Saudi Arabians, and they are deeply opposed to the ongoing conflict. He said, by this conflict continuing, you risk not only the collapse of all the Abrahamic Accords and the Camp David Accords, all the effort put in over time, but you risk the entire nations of Jordan and Lebanon falling to crises because of the groups within them, as well as refugees and just misfire missiles. Playing off those missiles, he said that the United States shot down 3 cruise missiles, which he said was about a week. So I imagine around October 21st, 22nd, 23rd in there, that was shot by the Houthis in Yemen towards Israel, and the U.S. shot down 3 of those. He said that this is an absolutely horrid diplomatic event for the United States and its global hegemony, and the Arab world grows further from us daily. So, if you want to look at what this means in my personal analysis of the situation, it simply means that this ongoing conflict causes nothing but issues for everybody who has a hand in the cookie jar, so to speak. This conflict is one in which you are going to have the lives of millions at risk every single day due to the failure of the United States to influence the region and put the correct pressure on Israel to come up with a 2-state solution in the beginning. From the United States perspective, we are risking not only these lives, but also the future success of our nation as we wrongfully take our attention away from what our main adversary is in the grand strategy of the world right now, in China and the Far East. Instead, we are focusing on a conflict which has no end in sight and is going to cause a dark, dark time for the Middle East. In the Middle East itself, every country there has to turn their attention from improving themselves to helping and fighting for Israel and Palestine, Israeli and Palestinian lives, but also for their own personal countries themselves. They have to keep and maintain the balance within them as people grow in support. And these people are going to slowly turn away from the power that is the United States to the 2 other global powers to see which nation can bring a change in the area and create a proper agreement and be the great power which the United States should have been in the beginning. There's just my sources. Thank you.